Hello, I'd like to share a couple thoughts on the game first before we get started here, and that is, first of all, just an incredible effort by our team in Dallas. Coach Patterson has been a friend for over 20 years. Incredible respect for that team. That certainly is a top 10 program, top 10 team. First time we got to coach against it, but you saw it Sunday when we started preparation for them. To go down there in that environment and play the way they played, we're just very proud of them. The champions on defense were Nick Bosa, B.B. Landers, Jonathan Cooper, Devon Hamilton, Malik Harrison, and Jordan Fuller. Played exceptional. And the player of the game was the guy that scored a touchdown. I just got to read these stats for Draymond. 3 tackles, 2 assists, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 7 quarterback hurries, 1 knockdown, 1 pass broken up, 1 interception, and 1 touchdown. Have a day. On offense, you had offense line, all of them played very well. Very much improved group. Isaiah Prince, Michael Jordan, Thayer Mumford, Demetrius Knox. I just want to point out Knox has done so well. Malcolm Pridgeon, a first-time starter against that kind of defense line, played well. J.K. Tobbins had a great day. Post-contact yardage was awesome. He had 121 total yards. And then the wide receiver group was outstanding. You had K.J. Hill at 6 receptions, Johnny Dixon. Ben Victor didn't have any catches, but he's really starting to come on and threw himself in there on some great blocks. Terry McLaurin, one of the most unselfish players I've ever been around. Start to throw him in the Evan Spencer category, and Paris Campbell. Player of the game was Dwayne Haskins, 24 of 38 for 344 yards, 3 total touchdowns, and played very well. On the kicking game, Johnny Dixon was the player of the game. He downed a punt inside the 10, 39-yard kickoff return, and 17 production points. The other guy who's just playing exceptional is Jocelyn Wint, who needs to. Did very well. I'll talk about that here in a second. That's the champions. Then also the plan to win. The plan to win in big games, especially on the road against elite personnel, is this was followed pretty much to a T against an explosive offense and very good defense. But the plan to win, we had 2 defensive scorers in our defense, which we're counting a punt block, part of a defensive play now. 2 scores and turned the ball over on the 25-yard line, and the offense scored 2 plays later. That's a 21-point switch shift. I'm not sure you win that game without that. TCU started 13 of their 14 drives inside their own 25, 9 of those inside their own 20. They have a punt returner and kick returner that is one of the best I've seen, certainly in the last 10 years, named Turpin. We knew that going in, kind of took your breath away as you're getting ready to watch him play. But he had 3 kickoff returns for just 56 yards. That's under 20 yards a return, and 0 punt return yards. The amount of time and effort that our players put into that was phenomenal. Justin Hilliard, Dante Booker, Marcus Williamson, Keandre Jones, Jocelyn Wint, Jeffrey Okuda, and Terry McLaurin are just some guys that I have so much appreciation for their unselfishness to do that phase of the game, which is obviously very important. I want to thank the Buckeye Nation for the support down in Texas. That's the 3rd time we've been down there since 14, and the support was awesome. I also want to thank Coach Day. I knew Coach Day was a difference maker when we hired him. I followed his career. He was with me at Florida, and his professionalism and what he's done has been phenomenal, and the rest of our staff with Coach Shiano, Kevin Wilson, Alex Grinch, and the other coaches have been tremendous. But most importantly, I want to thank our players. And it was very hard to watch because it was such an intense game, but it seemed that as the game got tougher, our players got better. And that's a sign of good people, brotherhood, and most importantly, a very good team. This is the first time I've had a chance to visit with you since Media Day. And I want to start off by apologizing for that performance. I want to be really clear that there is 0 intent to mislead. The report found that. I did not answer questions with the accuracy that I should have. I didn't listen closely to the questions. And I want to explain why. At the late the night before press conference in Chicago, I received a text message. And the message asked me, would I like to comment on a felony assault arrest in 2015 of Zach Smith? And I was shocked. I had no recollection of a felony assault arrest. I immediately sent a group text out to people, and the people were Gene Smith, Jerry, assistant athletic director, I recall, and a couple of people back here at the office. And to paraphrase the text, it was, I do not recall the events of 2015. Please advise, I do not want to be wrong at Media Day. And that text was out there, and that's what I sent out. About an hour later, I get a phone call from a staff member here who was our liaison to law enforcement. And he says, Coach, there's no arrest. We can't even find a police report in 2015. The only thing that we see on his record is a divorce and his recent trespass situation that he had in July. And there's nothing to that story. There's nothing to it. I hang up the phone, I go to sleep, I wake up in the morning, and I go to Media Day. The focus of as I was asked questions, was on that felony arrest that never took place. And so once again, for those of you, I see some of you here that ask those questions, I apologize. I got to do a better job of listening. It's very comfortable for me obviously to talk about football and players and teams, but that situation, when I started getting peppered about questions about what I perceived to be a felony assault arrest, that's why I answered it the way I did. I've always had somewhat good relationship with the media. I've always been forthright with you the best I can. If I have not been, I apologize, but there's no intent. There's no intent. For those of you who know me well, some of you don't know me at all, there's never been an intent to mislead. I would also like to give you a little bit of a timeline of what's happened in the last several years here. In 2012, I was hired at Ohio State, and I was putting together a staff. And the staff, it was going fast. A lot of activity going on, a lot of recruiting going on. And I looked into Zach Smith. He's worked at 2 other previous universities. I was getting very, very high recommendations about his performance as a recruiter and his knowledge of our offense. I made a decision to hire him. In 2012, 13, and 14, he did a very good job. One of the best recruiters on our staff. Developed an excellent group of receivers. Some would say the 2014 group of receivers was as good as ever play here at Ohio State. In 2015, I received, Gene Smith came up to me on the practice field and told me there was a domestic issue between Zach and Courtney. We were both furious. I remember getting a hold of Zach and telling him, if this is domestic violence, you're fired immediately. Gene Smith reiterated that issue to him, that this would be instant termination if this was domestic violence. He told us that it was not. He would never hit Courtney. He had never done it, never would do it. And once again, I and Gene made perfectly clear, if this is domestic violence, you're terminated within minutes. And so I then asked Gene, I said, what do I need to do? Gene said, allow the investigation to take place. Do not get involved in the investigation. We'll update you along the journey. And go. It was right in the middle of the season, and 15, as you recall, was a very up and down season, a very intense season. And I was updated throughout that time. As I was receiving updates, as it became close to the conclusion, what I was hearing back from law enforcement is that this was not domestic violence, that this was a very nasty divorce, child custody issues involved, but it was not domestic violence. And finally, in conclusion, that was what we received back, that there was no arrest, no charges, not domestic violence, just a very messy divorce with child custody issues. I then had to make a decision, and that decision was, I've seen Courtney Smith for many years around here with her beautiful children. I made a decision, like I have in the past, once I knew domestic violence was not part of the situation. Once again, if it was perfectly clear, and the report shares that. Mary Jo's report came out with that, saying that that she was impressed with our core values of treat one with respect, which we work so hard on that around here, and then also that I would fire any staff member immediately if I believed or I was told that this was in fact domestic violence. So I made a decision. How do I best help stabilize? I've seen these kids many, many times. Like I said, I've seen Courtney many, many times. I was dealing with a coach that was dealing with work-related issues all during this time of this separation and divorce. And so I made a decision, and I talked to Gene about it. Let's get him very intense counseling. Let's monitor this closely and help try to stabilize this guy so he can be a good father and support the family the way he should. And that's what we did. So we put him in counseling. We watched it very closely throughout the counseling. I was made aware of a couple scenarios, situations that took place. One was a credit card situation where he was supporting 2 homes, I was told, and he maximized his credit cards. Gene and I both sat with him and tried to advise him through that. I was also made aware that through the counseling, university counseling, that he has a prescription drug that he was using more than he should. I again asked what needed to be done, and they assured me he was doing much better. He was getting everything in order, and I actually thought we made it through it. He came out the other end of this very difficult time. His production increased. He looked much better. I saw his children constantly, which I encourage. We have family nights every week, so I see his children all the time. He became, once again, one of our better recruiters. Had a good year, had a great year in 17, and actually had some job offers this year to move on. He made a decision to stay here because he didn't want to leave his children. I thought we made it through, and periodically I would ask about the relationship with him and Courtney, and I was told by him that it was very good. It was very good. And so that was in 16, 17, and really the first 6 months of 18, I heard nothing other than things are going fairly well, very well. And then in summer of 2018, we're on vacation. I was back here getting work, getting ready for training camp. I'm made aware of a trespassing citation. I call him in immediately off of vacation, and I ask, what's this all about? And I find out it's actually 2 months prior to when I found out. I was very upset with him, very angry about not being forthright. And because I have to alert Gene, which I did immediately. I alerted Gene about this trespassing. He made it sound as if he just dropped his kids off at the wrong place. He was supposed to drop them off here. Instead, he dropped them off here. I think he said like a $25 fine or something like that. And I just was so angry that I had to hear about it from somewhere else. I made it clear. You keep me posted on everything. I've made it clear to all our coaches. I need to know before I'm told from you. And I go to Chicago, bring my family to Chicago. On Monday, I'm made aware of a protective order against Zach. Once again, he does not tell me. A protective order is obviously very serious, and I begin to go into termination mentality, and I alert Gene Smith a few hours later, and I fire Zach Smith. One other thing that I was asked several times throughout the investigation, and recently I've been asked, and it's about the deleted text messages or changing the setting on my phone. And I have never deleted a text message. I've never changed the setting on my phone. And I was asked that. I made that clear to the investigators. I've made it clear also many, many people have access to my phone, including IT people, including to people that help me recruit. It's not uncommon for me to recruit over 100 players a day and send out graphics and videos. I have hundreds of videos of my grandson and other family videos, and what happens is my phone started locking up throughout the spring, and the IT person would take my phone, and whatever he did to increase the storage capacity. And I found out in several months ago, I think late spring is what I was told, is that he changed my setting to 1 year. So once again, I never changed the setting on my phone. I never changed a text message on my phone. And when I heard that, I just, all due respect to the report, I would never do that, and I did not do that. I don't even know how to change the setting on my phone. So with that said, I'll answer any questions for you.
Thank you, Coach. We'll open up front row left. Mitch?
Urban, can you describe what it was like for you sitting and watching the first 3 games and where you were and what you were doing and how that was for you?
I was just devastated, and I love these players. You know, I have such a great respect for these players, and that's what I try to share throughout my career, is that how hard these guys work. I think, you know, a lot of times people see number 68 or number 5, number 7, and the time and effort that goes into that, and that's their payday, that's their time to go showcase, and I'm not a part of it. I think even as hard as that was not being with them during the training camp. That's when you build your team. That's when I stay in a hotel with them. Very difficult. So I watched them at home. Some support would come over my house, friends, very close friends, and This one in particular, I only watched the good plays. I couldn't take it. I only watched the good ones. My daughter kept me updated, and I would seriously leave the room. It sounds silly, but I would leave the room. When the way that game started, it looked like that was an even, that team's very good. So I only watched the good plays. And there were some really good plays.
Did you yell at the TV?
I don't yell. I just squeeze my arms, and you guys see it on the sideline. I don't yell too much. I usually just wake up, bruised arms, and all that.
And folks, just want to remind everyone, I'd like to keep it at, if you needed follow-up, to one follow-up, because a lot of people have questions, and I want to get through as many as possible. Front row, middle. Dave?
Coach, you've mentioned many times how much you love this university. Has this situation affected your relationship with the university and perhaps your longevity here?
I have a great relationship with our president. Gene Smith, I'm as close to Gene Smith as anybody. And this, to me, has never been a job. When I took a year off, I wasn't planning on coming back coaching football. I was asked by Gene and the president at the time. Ohio State was going through a hard time, and part of my family didn't want me to coach again. And I came back because of my sincere love for the state. I grew up here, played high school football here, played college football here, and I love the school. I have a master's degree from Ohio State. My love is unwavering for Ohio State, even more so now. My apology is to Ohio State. My apologies, I made a mistake, and you're going to hear this throughout this several times, that my apology is not for turning back to domestic violence. I just want to be so clear with that. The report clearly states that, and that was a very thorough investigation. To paraphrase the findings, is that they respect our sincere commitment to respecting women, and that if I was ever aware or made aware or told that there was domestic violence taking place, I would have fired them immediately. My error is, and I've been accused of this before, by giving people second and third chances. And I saw a guy with work-related issues that had 2 children and an ex-wife that he needed to support the way a man's supposed to support him. And I went, and I was suspended for the fact that I went too far in trying to help a guy with these work-related issues. So to answer your question, my love is stronger forever to this university.
And real quick, in regard to the Zach and Courtney Smith situation, are there things that you wish you could say about that you feel like you can't say?
I've been, this has been occupying my life for whatever weeks now, so I think I've said everything I possibly can. I'm not sure.
I just didn't know if there's something that you wish you could say that you feel like you can't say publicly about it's a very delicate situation, obviously.
Very delicate.
Are there things you wish you could say about it?
Far left, Matt?
When you, a couple of Fridays ago, I think it was before the first game, you put out a statement on Twitter just reiterating, kind of like you have here, why you were suspended. I'm just wondering, what were you seeing, what were you hearing, what prompted you that I need to clear this up? What was there a tipping point for you that I got to put something out?
Well, that, quite honestly, it came from my family. I'm not a social media guy. I don't, especially in difficult times when I understand there's pretty hard criticism out there. I do what I try to do, and what was brought back to me is that there is a perception out there that I was suspended because of domestic violence. And my entire life, I think I put out there that this is something that when I was a child, that was made very clear to me. It's called core values. And you can fix a mistake. There's no fixing domestic violence. If that takes place, it's dismissal, immediate, remove the person from the program. And I was not suspended for that. It was very clear in the report. That was really, I think, the original part of the report is, did we turn our back on domestic violence? That was the #1 reason. And my daughter actually, I don't know how to tweet out. She actually, I wasn't allowed to, usually the university does for me. And we all felt it was very necessary to be very clear what was taking place. And I'm going to say it 100 times, and I apologize for being repetitive, that I was suspended I want to say this too, that Dr. Drake, who I have incredible respect for, I apologize for putting him in this situation. It was a mistake. And, but the mistake was once again, and we shared this conversation many, many times, the mistake was going, especially when some of these things started being reported in the media that I had no idea about. You know, this is an extremely strong, proud university. He's an incredible president. I have a great athletic director. I've tried for the majority, you know, for my career to do the right thing. And I went too far in trying to help a troubled employee with work-related issues. And like I've done before, I've helped other staff members who had, you know, I wouldn't say similar, but had marriage issues that we tried to help, and it's worked. So that's why we put that out.
And just quickly, your relationship with this current staff that you've had to stay away from, and they've gone through 3 games, has it changed? Are you closer with that? I'm just wondering how you feel about that matter.
Oh, very unique situation, and I'm just, I can't be more impressed. You guys saw it, and that's not by accident. I mean, people say go win a game. You just look across every week how hard it is to win a college football game. You take nothing for granted, and you know how involved I am in the kicking game. Just to see, you know, the punts getting off and the guys covering and the guys. I mean that, you know, ball security. I don't have the stats right here, but you know, that part of that game was won because we had created 3 turnovers, 2 for scores, and a block punt. We had 0, and our punting was outstanding. Just things like that. That's how you measure excellent coaching staff. And Ryan Day's elite, but I have other, you know, there's other elite coaches on our staff, and very thankful for them.
Second row left, Ari.
Urban, the report found that you have suffered memory issues or from memory loss, and it was used as an explanation for some of your decision making. What influence has that had on your ability to coach this football team?
I'm very healthy. You know, I've had cyst issues in my head over the years, and I've had a couple procedures and actually 1 surgery. Also very intense medicine. It was, I'm telling you, this report was so thorough and so transparent. And so when questions came up about some of the conversations, for example, exact conversations back in 2015 or back before that, and I didn't have great recollection of it, so they would ask about, have you had any of this? Have you had this? What about this? And I said, well, you know, so I was very transparent. It was very personal, obviously, but no, it has not. I'm very healthy and good.
Did the memory issues that you had impact some of the decision making that you made, or was that just them?
No, I think it was just so transparent. You know, there's things in that report that are very transparent and very thorough. You know, the relativeness to the investigation, you know, that's, but I can just be truthful and tell you I've had some pretty heavy meds at times, but it certainly doesn't impact the way I coach.
Right behind Ari, Glenn.
Coach, how damaging has this been to your credibility? Paul Feinbaum last night said your credibility has been shattered. How do you feel about that, and is he wrong?
That's tough to take. You know, I've spent 30 plus years in coaching. You know, never been perfect. Tried extremely hard. You know, my love of players, my love of development of players, my love of team, my love of university has never been challenged. You know, when I start to hear that, that's why I'm hoping something like this, where clarity, I wanted to go through everything. If I did not lie to, if you're talking about lying to the media, I did not lie to the media. I did not do a very good job. Now everybody has a decision to make and a choice to make. I was very clear about why I said what I said, and I apologize for that. If that destroys a guy's credibility, then I apologize that. Also, did I turn my back to domestic violence? Not one bit. I never would do that. And that's been made perfectly clear after that very thorough investigation. And for people who know me know that's absolutely intolerable. I've always been a very strong advocate of anti-domestic violence. I've been accused of giving student athletes more than 1 chance, sometimes more than 2 chances, especially people from very tough situations. Not core value situations, but mistakes. And with great success we've had over the years. Not perfect, but great success over the years. I've helped staff members who've had issues over the years. Not exactly like this, but a couple that had marital issues to great success. I erred in going too far to try to help a guy with work-related issues. And as the investigation took place, these behaviors were showing up that I had no awareness of. So once again, I can only do what I do. I apologize, but there is no intent to mislead, no intent to not be truthful with everybody, including this university, including you guys. It was, I went too far, and that's what the president and that's why I was suspended. So.
Can you explain the discussions regarding the text messages and the potential deleting of the text messages?
All due respect to that report, that was, once again, a very transparent, very open report. You know, I don't recall exactly any conversations about that. And I, once again, during the investigation, they asked me about that. They found my settings to be on 1 year, which I wasn't quite sure what that meant. And I found out later, after I went back to work, that the IT people changed my phone to 1 year months earlier than that. There was never a deleted message. And I think the report even said that there was, you know, I can't recall exactly what it said, but I did not delete text messages, never changed setting on my phone.
Far left, Lori.
Coach, how do you balance your desire to help coaches through issues and your desire to get your players the best coaching and role modeling as possible?
That's a great question, and one that I've been replaying in my head over and over again. When I hired Zach, he glowing reviews from the previous 2 coaching staffs he worked on about his family, about his recruiting, about his first few years here were fantastic. You know, 2012, he took, I think, the leading receiver at 10 catches a year before we got here. We developed Philly Brown, Devin Smith, and those guys. Second year, third year, we won a national title. The receivers are elite. 2015, you had an 8-month window of a separation, a divorce, work-related issues that we were dealing with. And I had 2 choices. Eliminate him right there, but I just, you know, I saw Courtney around here so many times throughout recruiting, and we have family dinners every week. I saw these children, which I encourage all the time. I saw them all the time around here. And I just, the way my head works is, how do I help this situation? Firing him, will that help it? You know, in hindsight, if I knew some of the things I knew after this investigation about his personal behavior that I was unaware of, that's an obvious. But at the time, that's not what was made aware. So that's a fine line. I try to have pretty good success rate of hiring elite coaches around here. And really my entire career, look at all the head coaches, and character is very important. When I was hiring him, I believed I hired the right guy. In hindsight now, I look back with all these other issues that took place during that time period, I did not hire the right guy.
Have you found that throughout this whole process that you learned some valuable lessons about domestic violence, Coach? I mean, I know you made an effort, you brought in Brenda Tracy and things like that before, but have you found this an educational process for yourself too, a little bit?
I found this whole thing to be an educational process. And since my first day at Bowling Green, when I was putting together our coaches manual, when I was a young man, my dad gave us our core values: honesty, treat women with respect, no drugs, weapons, or stealing. And that's always been, I can't say that also now this is on the forefront, it always has been. And, but I just say I haven't learned. I learned a great deal. You know, I learned, we brought in Ray Rice and spoke to our team about that. We always have, Shelley, Meyer, and Sheila Smith put on a workshop last year called Healthy Relationships, and it's just always on the forefront. Throughout the facility, we have examples of mistakes made by people that just destroy lives. So it's always been on the forefront, but to say I haven't learned, I learned a great deal.
Fourth row left, Dan.
Urban, I wanted to clarify your conversation with Brian Multolini. You didn't talk about text messages at all that day, August 1st?
My recollection of that is that there is an article out, something about the press may have been access to your phone, and I said, don't worry about my phone. There's nothing to hide on my phone, and that was it.
And then I guess you said at the time you didn't believe there was a domestic violence issue when the police came back to you. What do you
I'm
feel?
sorry?
You said in 2015 you were told there was no domestic violence issue. It was just a divorce. What do you believe about Courtney Smith's allegations now?
Back in 2015, I just, the report said that both Gene and I were too reliant on law enforcement. And my entire career, we've been taught that if there's any type of investigation with a student athlete, with a staff member, any law investigation, to stay out of it and get updates along the way. All I can go by is what I was told by law enforcement, and that was that there was no domestic violence. And this was a messy divorce with child custody involved, and that's what we were told.
Is that still what you believe?
I can only go by what was told to me by law enforcement. What I have learned is that, especially situations as serious as law enforcement, you need to ask more questions. And I've always been kind of told not to. And I just think that after going through this, that I need to ask more questions.
Over here to the right, Clay.
I think you've addressed it, but I recall when you were hired, OSU was going through a tough time, and I asked something about when you encounter a situation and you said, you have to go in there and blow it up. I mean, you cited chapter and verse here. Your statement seems to reflect, with regard in general to Zach, was there a time when you should have blown it up, I guess, is the question.
I look back now, there was. At the time that it was time to make a decision was in, like I said, 12, 13, and 14 were very productive years. 15 was, that's when work-related issues started to surface too. And he was late for several meetings, handful of meetings, and also this domestic situation that law enforcement was involved. I had to make a decision. When it came back to me that there was no charges and no arrest, and it was actually told to us that this was not domestic violence, I look back now, I'm not sure I'd do the same thing. I might, because that's enough if you get to that point, especially how serious that is. But that's a hard situation, and I've had conversations with some colleagues about that. What do you do? Do you question the police? I'm not allowed to question the police. Are you allowed to go beyond, start contacting victims and investigating yourself? That's, you're done. You can't do that. It's called tampering. So those are the fine lines that other people have dealt with, I've dealt with over the years. Many leaders, I've talked to a couple friends of mine in corporate America, and you give it to HR and you let the professionals do their work. And that's what I did.
Did Earl's influence always weigh on your mind, Coach?
Not about domestic violence, no. I think the fact that Earl was such a close mentor of mine, that the work-related issues, but I once again, I go back to seeing Courtney and seeing these children many, many times throughout the several years here. I mean, many times, because we encourage that. I wanted to try to help. Once I knew domestic violence and it was not part of the equation, how best to help these two young kids. Fire Zach Smith, can you support that family, and what happens next? And I knew they were work-related, but I thought all the work-related stuff was about this tumultuous time in his life. And I wanted to help Courtney. I wanted to help the children. How do I do that? And I talked to several people about this. How do I do this? And we've had great success, like I said, over the years. Try to put him in intense counseling so he can stabilize that family and be a good father, support the family the way he should.
Second row, right, Tony?
Coach, Ryan Day said that while you were gone, he didn't want to disrupt anything. He wanted to have everything ready for you and just didn't want to rock the boat. When you return, do you sort of do the same thing, even though it's your program, and do you have to do the same thing? You don't want to just come in like a bull in a china shop type of thing.
It's a good way of putting it. Bull in a china shop. I know. He's done phenomenal. His coaching staff's done phenomenal. You guys are witness to it. I was back 2 weeks ago, and one thing that I even asked today, how do I assist? I'm a fundamental person, a ball security guy. I watch things very closely. I'm very involved in the kicking game. I have not been that involved in the offense. I give my ideas, and I think they're doing exceptional. So I'm trying to just help the best, do the best I can.
Do you have an update on Nick Bosa?
Yeah, he's getting further tests this week. He will not play this week. Further tests on abdominal and a groin issue that we're dealing with.
Third row, right, Pat?
Urban, when Gene Smith came to you in 2016, to talk about Zach Smith's allegation of domestic violence. Why didn't you inform him about the 2009 incident involving Zach Smith at Florida?
That was actually in 2015, he came to me. In 2009, I was led to believe this was not domestic violence. There were no charges filed. I look back now that when he went to 2 other universities, and then he came, and that's when I hired him at Ohio State. That's when I should have made him aware of the situation. In 2015, I can't recall if I did or not discuss the 2009 situation.
If my recollection is right, Gene Smith said that he was not aware of the 2009
Okay.
incident. So if you didn't inform him, did you feel like that was in any way covering up a problematic situation?
Not covering up, but in hindsight, Pat, I should have at that time. I thought I did, but
Lastly, do you believe that Courtney Smith was ever a victim of domestic violence?
I can only rely on what information I receive from the experts.
Front row right here, Ken?
Yeah, Urban, do you anticipate an administrative staff shake-up at all on your staff based on the way things have been brought to you in the past concerning the other things that obviously went on with Zach Smith, from a sex in the office kind of situation, and all these other things that kind of evidently went on without you knowing about it? Do you anticipate making any changes in that regard?
Well, 2 things there, Tim. Number one is I need to do a better job creating an atmosphere where football, especially during the season, is so intense. And obviously I'm a very intense, focused guy, and people need to feel comfortable coming to me if there's any scenario, situations like this. I've had started that process. The majority, I have not talked to one person who was aware of that stuff that was going on, so I'm not sure. I know the report, I think, said something like that, but when you start talking about some of these behaviors that I've asked, and they were not aware of these behaviors that surfaced here in the last 2 months.
That's what I was going to follow up with, from the sense of you've even said this in press conference a couple of times, you like to have positive news coming across your desk. That's the way you kind of like to operate. Do you think this intimidated some folks into not bringing you negative news, so to speak?
I hope not, but that's something that Gene and I have talked about that I need to do. I've always thought I had that atmosphere. If someone was aware of some of these behaviors and did not bring it to my attention, then obviously I have to work on that. I am.
And then obviously that report about the strip club stuff and all that kind of stuff included another coach, Tom Herman. Do you remember having a conversation at all with Tom Herman during his time here about some things getting out of hand, et cetera? What do you recall? Because obviously he was there with Zach in this one instance at least. What do you recall of any of that?
Out of all respect, that there were 2 coaches involved, and when it was made clear when I was told what had happened, I was extremely upset. I called him in my office immediately. I told him they'd be fired if that ever happened again. That day, I instituted a morality clause in the program. I've been told that takes place at other places, and I don't care. It's Ohio State. We don't do that. And so I just was very clear that we don't do that.
And one last thing, it's been, we've all seen the text messages that Shelley had with Courtney Smith, and I think you've been clear from your recollection. You recall nothing of Shelley bringing that to you in any form or fashion, that kind of news. I mean, do you stick by that story, so to speak? I mean, she did not bring this up to you in 2015 or 16?
She never shared text messages with me, no.
Front row left, Doug?
Urban, what damage do you believe has been done to the Ohio State football program as a result of how you handled this and the investigation?
I think there was. I think I'm hopefully that I've already had many conversations with recruits, our families of our players. We sent out several letters to the families, but to say there's not damage, that there was. I'm hoping that the clarity of the damage is that why I was suspended and what the report came back, and that I was not lying to the media, I was not lying to people, or that I turned it back to domestic violence. And I'm going to do the best I can. If we can remove those two, which is the truth, the damage, I believe, is that we just went through a really hard time, and I made a mistake in helping a troubled employee, went too far in trying to help someone that had some work-related issues.
So you've mentioned the domestic violence component of this several times, and obviously, I think especially nationally, that is you understand that, that's a very
Sure.
important part of this, that is that very serious situation handled properly by people who are in power. Again, and everyone's made a lot of having the words on the wall and that kind of thing. In terms of actions to show how seriously you say you take domestic violence, what are the concrete examples you would point to in your past that show this is how I take domestic violence seriously? And what will you do, what can Ohio State do in the future to show that Ohio State, the football program, you take this very seriously?
Ever since I began as a head coach, and even in more recent years, I would say every other day, this is a very strong, last night I talked to our team about it. We have Power of the Unit messages to our players every Thursday, and I talk about domestic violence, Title IX respect. When I say the word Title IX, our players respond back to me, respect. That's how serious we take this. This is something that is constantly have conversation. It's not uncommon for me to send a group text out on a Friday or Saturday night. Remember, Title IX equals respect. This is something that I put the number one, I think there's an article done this summer. Number one is domestic violence, sexual assault. Number two is this opioid issue that we're all dealing with. Number three is the mental health of a student athlete. This is something that 10 years ago, now we have a full-time sports psychologist because that's how serious we take that. And then the concussion issue. Those are the four pillars that I told our staff, constant awareness to this. We try to go outside, a very good relationship with our Title IX office here on campus. I've constantly, I want to say 2 months ago, Ryan Stamper and I went over and met with Dr. J, Vice President in charge of Student Affairs here. And for no other reason, just how are we doing? What can we do better? What's out there that we can keep educating our players about the respect to women? That's such a serious issue right now. And so it's endless as far as what we've done. I made a mistake not in domestic violence. Where I made a mistake is not asking enough questions, I believe, and complete reliance on law enforcement. I've always, when you hear no charge, no arrest, how far can you go? And Gene and I have talked about that. Many colleagues I've talked about that. What's the next step when you say there's no arrest or no charge? What do you do next? And the one thing that's been made clear all along the journey is you can't go out and investigate. You're not allowed to. That's not something that's part of but you can ask questions, and I think the other thing is the red flags. Those are the things.
And you've addressed all these matters in different ways, the text messages, not informing Ohio State about what happened with Zach in 2009, however you want to characterize what was said in Chicago. It's the collection of those things together, right, that adds up sometimes. Even if you have an explanation, it can add up. For Ohio State administrators, for fans of Ohio State, why should they believe you're a trustworthy person?
That's also very difficult. For 6.5 years here, up until July of 2018, since we came back to Ohio State, we've taken, academic performance has been elite. Football performance has been very good. Life after football, Real Life Wednesdays we started has taken on a world of its own about development of players getting ready for life after football. The honesty and integrity within our program has been very good. My evaluations every year with the president and with Gene Smith have been very, very positive. This is a window of time that I made an error. But once again, that's why I'm hoping, and I'm going to keep saying it really for the rest of my life. This was about trying to help a troubled employee with work-related issues. It was not about lying to the media. And once again, if someone in his room says you lied to me, I'm telling you, that's fine. I'm telling you I did not lie. I misspoke, and I hope you can understand why my focus was on that today. You know, someone tells me there's a felony arrest, that's my focus. There was not one. I don't know why this came up. There's no felony arrest. But what about this? What about this? And I didn't listen closely. So that part I'm hoping that people are understanding about. The understanding about like deleted messages, I didn't do it. I'm not, the university found I didn't do it. The university is even aware that the IT guy changed my phone months before, just because my volume was filled. So I'm hoping that people listen, and I can only say the truth. I can only let you know. I'd like to say over 30 years that I've been accused of helping players too much and giving them too many opportunities. That's an accusation I accept, and I'm very careful about that. But I also, I've been that way my entire life, even outside of football. When I see someone in need, you help the person in need. How far do you go? That's that fine line. I've had, I counted at least 3 staff members over the 17 years that have been in difficult situations, and I've tried to help, never really fired anybody. I always take the approach trying to help them. I'm hoping that comes out. I understand that there'll be, this will take time, maybe never, but that's my job in a press conference like this, and really in relationships with you and recruits and administrators. I know our president now is very comfortable with the situation. We've had many, many conversations, and I know our athletic director are.
I gotta start to wrap it up, but I got a couple more questions.
One more,
over there.
just in general, you've made it clear that you went too far in trying to help Zach in the situation. And it does seem like you're in control of this football program, this football building. That's how it works. So you're the football coach, you're in charge of everything. Should there be more oversight from the athletic department to make sure that you're not doing too much with a certain issue, to make sure that they're informed all along the way with all, I know you have a personal relationship with Gene, but is it possible that a football coach can have too much power in a building to make unilateral
Absolutely.
decisions? And what can Ohio State do better going forward to make sure something like this doesn't happen again with a staffer?
Right. Absolutely, and that's always been a concern of mine. That's why when I was hired at Ohio State, I asked to have a full-time compliance officer in this building. There never was one. I wanted a guy here so he could, you know, for me to be in charge of compliance, which is very serious. I want to make sure doors are open, and I don't want to ever someone come to me and say you guys are violating rules. And that was my request. Whenever, within minutes, I hear of a situation, I contact Gene Smith and make sure, because I'm not qualified sometimes to handle these situations. I need help in this. I'm a football coach. I'm not an investigator. I need help with this. On campus, I've asked for much help from, like I mentioned, Dr. J, who's a very good friend, and she's great at her job. I asked for help. I asked for help from the Title IX liaison and Title IX coordinator. We're not Title IX people. Please help us with this situation. What can we do better? And that's what I was hoping was even going to come out more involved in this investigation, is that, you know, other than this window of time, which was very serious, the marks are over the top. And I was hoping more would come out. I haven't heard much, and I invite you to go ask, is how does the Ohio State coaching staff respond to any Title IX issues, any respect to women issues, any legal issues? I would be surprised to say as good as any school in the country. And that's the response back I get from my superiors, because I don't handle things. What I do is I seek advice on this, because, you know, I've been asked many, many times, how would you handle the situation differently? I'm here to tell you 3 years later and 6 weeks after going through this, I need help. You know, football coach, I've talked to many coaches about this. You know, do you need to go investigate this yourself, bring everybody in and talk to them? Absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. You know, there needs to be a channel. Does Ohio State? Yeah, we're looking at everything. I think this is a topic that every school in the country is going through. You know, there's some well-documented issues that have gone on in the last 5, 6 years. 20 years ago, you never heard much about it. It's a completely different animal, and I agree with it. This is such a fine line. But I do seek advice. And that's always for those, you know, you probably know me a little bit, but the people who know me and my superiors, instantaneous, elevated, instantaneous, need help me out to handle this situation. Not football related, the off the field things.
Far left, Rob.
Right, Urban, along those lines, there's debate, discussion about how much a head coach should have to know, should have to delve into personal issues and marriages. Where do you stand on that? I think you have said that everything is under your purview, but do you see that as fair, and is that just the way it is?
I think at high-profile football programs, that's the way it is. Do I think it's fair? No one forced me to be a head coach. You know, I think what goes on in people's homes is very difficult. You know, there were some things brought up throughout this facility that Zach did that completely unaware of. What's your responsibility to know that? That's why I want to create, you know, if someone knows something, I need them to come back. And I've asked a lot. And the people I've talked to in this facility, they were not aware of some of these salacious accusations that were taking place, and they were not aware. And so that's, I actually spoke to a friend of mine in corporate America. That's everyone's nightmare, is you're representing a very proud company, institution. You're responsible for hundreds of people. How much can you really know? The answer is you have to know.
Last question
I'll
over here to
follow
the
up.
right.
I know that domestic violence obviously is a very sensitive issue. And part of the sensitivity is you get into he said, she said situations. Through this time, the last 10 years, whatever, have you found yourself wondering about the credibility of Courtney and Zach? Is that part of the challenge?
I try to stay away from that because I don't, you know, I did ask Zach. Or no, I threatened him. Said, you're fired. I mean, like within seconds if I find out it's domestic violence. People have asked me, why didn't I reach out to Courtney and ask her? I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed. There's an investigation going on. We are still in conversation, Gene and I and other people, like I said. When that comes across the table, there's experts, there's professionals, they're called law enforcement. Please help us with this. You have rights to go investigate the situation, report back to us, and then we respond. And there's never a charge, never an arrest. How do I respond? And I just want to, once again, with this, saying that what I have learned is ask more questions.
Football question. How much better can this offense get?
A lot better. Yeah, this is two very good running backs, or, you know, we can get a lot better.
Right, and the last two questions. One question for Bill and one for Austin. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, you mentioned the stuff that you learned about Zach, and none of his job performance evaluations was any of this noted. Can you explain why that was?
In 2001 was, I just put personal on there, his personal work-related issues. He didn't get a raise one year, I believe that was the year. You know, I did discuss it with him, and once again, it was related to being late to meet a handful of meetings and the other personal issues. During that, it was about an 8-month window, but that was on there.
And you did say that in the ESPN thing today that you haven't talked to Courtney, and you might. What would you say to her?
I've said it several times, and I do want to say this, that there was a press conference the day that I found out I was suspended, and I was in a room for about 12 hours straight, not knowing, you know, the investigation, if I recall, was just concluded. I sat in my house and stared at walls for 2 weeks, and it was awful, and I was exhausted, and obviously very emotional that they just, I was suspended, never been suspended. And then I walk in a press conference and cameras are going, and I start getting rapid fire questions at me, and I did not do well again at that scenario. I came out a couple days later and said, I'm very sorry. And I'm saying this again right now, I'm very sorry. No 2 children and a wife or family should go through this, especially when this started becoming a media storm about these activities that were going on, and families chiming in and accusing families of each other, and no family should ever have to go through that.
And last question over here, Austin.
When you talked about that period of reflection that you had and the chance to maybe learn some lessons, now that you are at this point, what is it that you think that you learned? What will change? What did you get out of it on your side?
I think, once again, and I've had this question to me about a student athlete, you know, when I try to help a guy, and what doesn't get reported are the great stories, the positive results. Guys' lives change, and they get these opportunities that college football and education give you. Same thing about helping a staff member through a very terrible divorce, or when there's young children involved. This was a scenario that there were so many other outside forces coming in on both sides, and families on both sides. And this behavior that was going on that we were unaware of, you know, I learned a lesson, and that's, you know, how far do you go to try to help someone? And I'll be honest, to this day right now, I struggle with that. because I've always gone on trying to go help someone who, especially the people in those difficult situations. I always see, we have these family nights. I see 2 children, beautiful kids. I see them around our office, I'd say once a week, and that's throughout the whole year. I encourage our families to be around here. I've seen Courtney many, many, many times over the years. And I start to see these families, and part of the obligation of a leader, especially the way we do it here, is you're obligated to them to do the right things, to follow the rules, to perform on the field so people don't lose jobs and families get uprooted. And that's the way my mind works. When I saw this situation, once domestic violence was taken out of the equation, my mindset was that how do you help stabilize this situation? That man has an obligation to raise those kids, has his obligation to support that family. How can I help, and how can Gene help do that? We made a decision, and for many people out there that think that was a very wrong decision. I look back now with all the other information we gathered, it was a wrong decision. But what I knew at the time, I can tell you I thought we were doing the right thing at the time.
Coach, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,